You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Dewell. Today, we're talking about maximizing scarce resources, and joining me on today's panel is Kyle Brown, who has over 20 years of technical and business experience and guides companies to innovative technical solutions that solve business problems. We also have Howard Strauber, who is the head of business development at Invested Consultants, LLC, and he's a financial professional with over 30 years of experience in financial advertising, business development, and brokerage trading. What we're talking about today, it runs the gamut. I'm going to sum it up for you in 3 points so you can listen and take these things to heart and listen for them and how you can use them in your business today. The first is we got to figure out how to do it. What is a resource? How do we maximize it? All those things, we must figure it out. 2, leadership, and leading by example is an interesting thread through this whole program. And the third piece, looking at our business, thinking about our business instead of thinking only in our business. We've got to interpret what we see to make choices. We must. That's where our survival is. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Hey, Kyle, I want to know, knowing that we're all tasked with doing more with less, how do you maximize scarce resources in your work?
What I tend to do is try to take a very good look at what the objective is. From that point, I'll try to establish what resources that are available to me that I do have. From there, run a trial to see how far we can go, how close we can get to meeting the objectives with that particular set of resources. And if it doesn't work, then it's very easy to go back and tweak whatever didn't work the first time and try again. And fortunately now, when I do that, I'm usually right the first time, maybe the second. But if not, I would just keep trying until I got to the right fit of personnel for the particular objective.
Howard, I want to know, when we're tasked with doing more with less, how do you maximize your scarce resources?
Thinking of an old Clint Eastwood quote, and it was from one of his films, A Man's Got to Know His Limitations. Skill sets in general, I need to know what I have, how urgent I need to do it, how quickly it needs to be done, and how do I get from point A to point B, and to understand there's going to be setbacks. It's not going to be a direct linear equation, at least in what I do for a living. And I don't look at life that way, to expect the unexpected, in my opinion.
A word that neither of you used, and I was a little surprised with, because this is a small business term, and in fact, it has become a buzzword even in large businesses. And it's the concept of bootstrapping, this inclusive thing, which I got to take a side note here because I'm a little bit of a tech geek, and I know Kyle's a tech geek, and Howard, you're aspiring to be a tech geek. So Bootstrap, there's actually stuff you can code with, libraries called Bootstrap. We all boot our computers. I think it's funny that this word bootstrapping has that in its history, and I don't understand how we get from technical computer stuff to actually doing things unless we're talking about efficiency. Am I right? What do you think about when you hear the word bootstrapping?
When I hear bootstrapping, I think about self-funded solopreneurs, one-person companies, and if that one person maybe does have other resources, they are possibly contractors or temporary resources. Other than those things, I guess what bootstrapping means to me the most is being very tactful and resourceful and using things and resources that you already have at your disposal to meet an objective versus going out to ask for or acquire things that maybe, as far as finances go, you don't have the means to do.
The word I kept coming through my mind was the word inclusiveness, meaning if I don't have the ability, the skill set, or the time that I need to help and rely on others. And that the word inclusiveness and the willingness to work with others is crucial in this aspect. I'm not an island unto myself. And maybe that's because of, I know my limitations, my technical limitations. Like the first time I did this with you, we had to practice the day before, just for me to figure out how to get on. It's sort of like when you listen to somebody, you don't understand a word that they use, can you define it for me? Instead of glossing it by and not understanding what's being said, but just asking for help and that inclusiveness.
With practice, I get it right the first or the second time now, right?
Right. Definitely that was with a lot of not getting it right the first or the second time.
Well, it's building both of those things, asking for help and learning to get it right on the first time. That takes practice. And
Yes.
I never get it. I shouldn't say I never get it right all the time. I'll say that the first time. We're all talking about problem solving here, and we're all putting different words around problem solving. And that's something that I love, because that's what I associate bootstrapping with, is this concept of, what do I have? What do I not have? What do I want? Where am I trying to go? Am I iterating on something that exists, or am I building something so far out there that I have no idea what it might actually look like until we go to the drawing board? I mean, all of those things start with a problem to solve, don't they?
Jessica, you mentioned the Twitter bootstrap. Maybe you didn't use the word Twitter bootstrap, but the bootstrap framework that you were talking about earlier, that name makes it a little confusing because it is a technical term for a set of features and programs that someone could take and use who maybe isn't a web designer and very quickly produce something that is that looks like it was designed over thousands of hours, which in fact was Twitter. The people at Twitter shared that resource to the community. So actually, when you think about it, the name Bootstrap is because they did the work. They are a funded company, and they made the resource available to the community. So by accessing that, that is really a good example of what I was talking about earlier, as far as using resources that are available to you to accelerate or do what you would normally have to have a large number of resources do. So actually, the name does make sense where it gets confusing sometimes.
I actually like how you tied it together, because I knew there was a connection. I'm not quite techie enough to know. I just know people that I work with use this bootstrap interface.
It's a huge time saver, absolutely.
Okay.
I was also thinking about risk taking too. I think there was kind of going around it too. It's about risk taking as well, and one's comfortability about taking those risks, whether you're doing it in your work, in your play, whatever sort of situation, is the comfort level to be discomfortable and to understand setbacks too.
I would agree with that 100%, Howard. I'm listening to the questions and really focusing in directly on the specific questions, but generally as someone who's bootstrapping probably is taking more risk than someone who has a lot of resources at their disposal, or whether it be money or people or whatever. Usually a bootstrapper is without those resources. And you're right, they probably are taking significant risk in whatever it is that they're working on.
You're right. If there is no reason to try and get better at something, if we're not feeling pressure of some kind to make a change, to find the answer, to figure out how to do it on our own, we won't.
I guess we all respond differently to different environments. I was having a conversation with my wife this morning about this very thing. For some of us, the conversation happened to be about remote work, and are you more productive when you work remotely? And one of the arguments that I hear a lot is no, because I need someone to stay on top of me and remind me of time and let me know what a priority is and that kind of thing, where I'm completely the opposite. I love remote work. I think it's a very effective way and less distracting way to get things done. But I also think that it's different for every individual.
So the level of accountability, and can it come from within us, or can it come from outside of us to actually get things done?
Not to get off track of bootstrapping, but I think that the individual has a lot to do with it. Some folks just aren't that comfortable with taking the risk and moving forward with things the way that a bootstrapper has to do. Because as a bootstrapper, you really are doing everything most of the time alone. Unless you can convince somebody to be as crazy as you are and go down that road, they're probably going to be doing it by yourself.
It also depends on your experience. I'm 57. I'm going to say for most 2 years, except for those 2 years, I was always on commission driven. And it didn't make me any better, but that general experience of eating what you kill, you kind of do get, from a certain perspective, you get used to risk taking. It doesn't make it any better. And there's some people that certainly, and I've seen both sides, revel in the structure of being inside a structure. We're all going to generally become more and more remote in what we do for a living. And I think it has to do with the fact the financial needs of business itself, that the overhead costs of structuring a group of people in a place for 5-6 days a week, if they can do it financially easier and faster, more remote, you lose some of that structure and the ability or inability, I think, for people to work on their own and work well with others is a lot different when you're remote and when you're in an environment where you have a water cooler, so to speak.
This concept of bringing people together around a common cause to make something happen, whether it's something like the purpose of a pencil, whether it's something like a volunteer organization, and he wrote a book and had this great journey. He came up with something to do and figured out how to get it done. And once he was able to figure out how to get it done, then people flocked to him, helped him build his reality because he had something to show them and was able to articulate it in a way that made them want to participate, that made them want to give their money, that allowed him to then grow his team and put more infrastructure around his idea of educating children across the world and making sure everybody, all children, have a chance to be educated. He created a movement, but he really started with an idea that he was able to put into motion on a very small scale first. It's really hard to get big bucks. It's really hard to get great employees when the risk is higher for something that's more unknown. So I'm curious, from your examples, being entrepreneurs and business owners and having worked in a lot of business settings through your experience, how much do you rely on this movement for where you're at in your world and your journey right now compared to the product that you have and the benefits that that particular product offers?
In the first 20 plus years of my life, I was brokering in the structure of a business, either on the floor or in an office for sugar options or futures. And I basically dealt with companies and countries. So I was structured within a structure, but I was always on commission. I always killed my own food. And now over the last, I'm going to say 8 years, where that has melted away because we basically have gone from open outcry. It doesn't exist anymore. Everything is computerized. You change or you die. And the interesting thing about leadership is, to me, whether I've had my own business or part of a business, you got to really roll up your sleeves and you lead by example. And you got to be able to do the same things you expect others to do. And that, to me, is what a common cause is. Whether it's 2 people, assuming they're 2 people, or 1,000 people, the example that's set by leadership and the willingness of leadership to do the things that they expect others to do, that all for one and one for all sort of mentality is crucial, absolutely crucial for success. People will not blindly follow people, but will follow a leader, endure deprivation, whether it's financial or otherwise, or be more willing to endure deprivation if that person leads by that example. If not, I think it doesn't matter what the idea is. You can reinvent the bulb if you wanted to. If you're not willing to lead by example, I think it's meaningless. I really do.
You shouldn't ask for people to do something that you are either not willing to do yourself or haven't actually done yourself. A part of leadership is developing your team and your talent. It's only going to benefit everyone in the end. Even if a person leaves a company that you train, that resource may be leaving your company. That's a reflection on you. And those, to me, are the kind of people you want working for you. You want the kind of people who could one day be your competition. Because before they become your competition, they're putting all that energy into your business.
Is leadership required to have this vision for some sort of a product or service that other people down the road may want to be a part of?
If you go the route of validation, doing your best to validate there's a need or purpose for an idea before you put any time or resources into actually developing it. I'm talking about software products primarily because that's what I spend a lot of my time and focus. Well, it's applicable to physical products as well. I don't think that leadership is really necessary at that stage to figure out whether someone is willing to swipe a credit card for a product or a service that you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
I think where leadership may become more important is once you have gotten some validation, or maybe you didn't, maybe it's just not a good idea and you're not going to do it. But if you do get some folks saying, hey, I would like for you to build this out, I want to see this and I'm willing to pay you for it, then your leadership starts to become a little more important after that, because now it's time to implement. Now it's time to take the idea and turn it into that product or service. The leadership becomes more important at that stage. I'm answering no in terms of formulating the idea, because you can always get help with the implementation from someone who may be a much stronger leader than you. I'm answering yes, that I think it's important once you get to the point where you're ready to start implementing and creating the product.
I would agree, but I also think it's situational. I don't believe in the generalization of leader, get out of the way, that a leader in situation A is going to be a leader in situation B just because you have certain characteristics. Being a leader is also allowing others to take those risks, and that if they might have more in-depth or better skill set, for lack of a better word, you let them run with it and be comfortable with it. You don't pout. I think that's important too. And I also think that leaders are to be helpful, but it's also not a kumbaya moment too. I don't think you're there to say there, for a lack of a better word. Sometimes fear and intimidation is needed. Intimidation, but say,
you want to be a shouty boss? What?
No.
That's actually a hashtag we made up on this show. So I get to use, every time I get to use it, I want to use it.
But if you're happy, I'm happy. And that's the important thing. If it's a lifeboat situation, if you look at it all for one and one for all, somebody has to express that. Okay? It's not everybody saying, I'm going to do my thing, you're going to do your thing. If it's all for one and one for all, sometimes it has to be stated, and someone has to say, I'm all and I'm one at the same time. I liked what you just said, actually. But I also know that, you know what, there's one leader, usually. You have an alpha dog, and then you have a couple of other people that are sub-alpha, and then you have the rest of them. And that's just the reality of a reality. Not everybody is meant to lead. I remember my son, he must have been about 8 or 9. And he was on a baseball team and that went like 3-10, and they gave him trophies. I think that sets the wrong example. You don't give a trophy for not being successful when you're 3-10. You learn from the setback. And that's about what you learn from leadership. You don't reward mediocrity as well. I think you have to be supportive, but you don't have to say there either. And I think that's an important, crucial aspect of leadership too.
Which is not a shouty boss. It's a very purposeful company leader. And I'm using the word boss and leader interchangeably because they tend to kind of be that way. But It doesn't matter where you're at. Whether you report to somebody, you're at the front of the line or the back of the line, it doesn't matter. This applies to you. You wanted to say something, Kyle. I could see it. What did you want to add?
Everyone is definitely not a leader. And just because someone may have the title, it doesn't make them a leader. I think people respect courage. They respect someone who's willing to lead by example, which we were talking about earlier. They're someone who just has integrity and shows that they are about what they say that they are about. And if they tell you they want you to help them build this business or whatever it is, and they show you that through their examples, I think that those are qualities a leader has. I think someone who's not a leader just talks and never really produces or never really shows you with their actions what they're actually about. So yeah, everyone's not a leader. Title alone can't make a leader.
You are listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, where I am speaking with Kyle Brown and Howard Strauber. We are talking about bootstrapping. We're talking about this concept of maximizing our scarce resources. We're going to shift this conversation because we have a really good base. We have a good base of what does it mean to have scarce resources and figure out what we have to work with. It's also something that we have to really understand And I say have to here on purpose. Probably must would be a stronger word, in the sense that we have to know ourselves. We have to know what we need. We actually have to be really good at problem solving. And we were just talking about leadership right before this short break. And we're talking about that. What do we need to do? Just because we have a title doesn't make us a leader. And that's what this show is all about. Business leaders that must step up to keep the game going, add value, and develop more people within our own organizations. I'm going to bring it back to maximizing scarce resources. We all have to do more with less. And both this concept of inclusiveness, problem solving, figuring out what we need to do when we need to do it, and getting really good at that is where we can add specific value and measure some results. How much, when we're talking about this scarce resource piece, let's tie it back to some reports. Let's tie it back to some outcomes. When we're bootstrapping, how important is it to actually know where our revenue is coming from?
To me personally, I need to know that at all times. If you're not generating revenue, or more important, profit, it's a dangerous place to be, in my opinion. You don't really know what you're doing. I have worked with a lot of smaller businesses over the last 10 years or so, and it's always amazing to me when someone tells me they do not know what their number is, or they don't even know what I'm talking about when I say, well, what's your number? When I ask what's your number, I'm basically saying, what do you have to do to break even every day? How much business do you have to do to break even every day, or every week, or every month? And a lot of smaller business owners that I've talked to don't know what that number is. They just know that their doors are open and customers are coming in the door. For me personally, I would never do business that way. Never is not really a word I like to use a lot. I would try my best to avoid having to do business that way. You do what you have to, but knowing how much money is coming in the door as well as how much money is going out is important from the very first day. You're going to have a period where you may not necessarily be producing a profit. You also don't want to be going deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole. And if you're not looking at those numbers, then you won't know which direction you're going. You can't gauge it by how many people tell you they like what you're doing. You can't gauge it by how many people you have hired. The only way to actually really know is to look at your books, look at your numbers, to figure out what's leaving versus what's coming in. And if you're not on the right side of that, there won't be a business and nothing else is going to matter. So I think day one, you should be doing that.
You know, it's funny. I was just thinking of the word bootstrapping, or I was growing up, and it's actually a generation prior to mine, being pulled up by one's bootstraps, which basically meant, and I remember my father saying it because he grew up during the late Depression or the end of the Depression, was of deprivation, pulled up by one's bootstraps. Where bootstrapping, I get it where you're coming from, but it was a badge of courage. It was a badge of honor that you started from nothing. You started from deprivation, and you created, and you understood it was me against them, sort of thing. They were commission driven too. Deprivation and hunger is commission driven when you think about it. It's a pass-fail exam. Either you get food or you don't. It was a slang word. Obviously, they were scared every single day. But sometimes you don't have the chance of being scared. You just got to do it. For them, it wasn't monetary gain. It was life. It was life.
I'm listening to what you guys said, and I love it. I like the concept of, as long as I know how much money is going in and how much money is coming out, and am I in the red, am I in the black, things like that. It's very basic. It is amazing how many people put their heads in the sand, including managers and directors in larger organizations. In your businesses, what is your go-to report that tells you how you're doing? We don't need to know how you're doing, but we want to know, what's the go-to report that you use, and how often do you look at it?
I don't know if I have one particular go-to report. I'm an analyst at heart. I love metrics. I love data. I'm probably never just looking at one thing. I'm generally looking at a couple of different reports. And the reports that I tend to pay the most attention to, monthly income, I'll call it churn, right? The number of customers that I am no longer doing business with that month for whatever reason. To get an idea of why I'm no longer doing business with those customers, that gives me something to study. By retaining an existing customer, I think My time is better spent doing that versus going out and trying to recruit a new one. Every business is different. But for me, in the software business and in the consulting business, I try to hold on to people and study churn rates to see why they leave, if they leave. Try to solve whatever problem led to that.
There's not necessarily going to always be if somebody leaves me, and breaking up can be hard to do, as the song says, that there's going to be another person. Right. And ultimately, how do we keep food in my belly and a roof over my head? I do know they're going to be, but really from a day-to-day basis, in my world, to keep people satisfied, and I do most of my stuff on LinkedIn for myself and other people, it's looks, leads, what's in their pipeline, and how do I keep that pipeline satisfied. I really feel that I'm doing something successful. And this might be, well, it is arrogance. When I get an email or a phone call saying, look, you give me too many leads, can you slow it down? Or there's too much activity. You know what? That's your problem. That's not my problem. You're telling me you want to get this, this, and this. And when I'm succeeding, of course I slow down. But that to me, besides obviously money, and I don't think if you do it for what you're capable of and what you're telling people that what you can do, the money comes, there is going to be churn. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But I can't always say there's going to be another feeding or I have to find a new, quote unquote, a new victim. Because that might not necessarily be the case. If you can keep a churn below 15% on a year-to-year basis as far as the number of clients, I think one is successful too, in general. I think there's always going to be people leaving and people coming, but you really want to create the number of people there. I'm always looking for more. Ultimately, psychologically, I'm on the defensive, in my opinion. And there's nothing wrong with being on the defensive. Being on the defensive, there's a certain perspective of loss. You can smell desperation in people. You can smell desperation on a phone, on an email. And if I'm coming across that way, I'm diminishing my skill sets. I truly am.
So taking it from there, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this. We know where our money is at. We know what metrics are important to us in terms of, and this is applicable in our own businesses, of what is going to get us the most return for the least amount of work. And we know what are the processes that are required to get money coming in so we can spend money in a very smart way to get done what we want to get done. I want to know how you guys use these reports, the reflections that we've been talking about, the interpretations, the analysis of your businesses to prioritize what comes next.
Well, for me, strategy is huge. I'm always thinking about what's next. I'm always looking at plans, a big picture goal of where I want to be. So I'm always looking at all of this information to figure out what's the best way to get there. One thing I do want to mention is something I don't do anymore that I did a lot in the beginning was obsess about unknowns, and they call it an analysis paralysis. At a point, you have to launch your product, ship your product, launch your service, or whatever it is you're doing, you have to do it. Get the paying customers and then learn from what they are telling you. Let them educate you on what you need to meet your business. So the metrics, in addition to customer feedback, I'm always looking at all of them, but the ones that I let guide me the most are what customers are telling me that they want, that I am either not providing, and not that I'm going to go out and provide it. You have to figure out whether it's right. Just because a handful of people ask for something, you don't necessarily change your business model. But feedback that comes in from the customer to me is probably one of the biggest driving forces. And then based on that feedback and what I know my objectives are to be, I'll make a decision. I make decisions based on those pieces of information. Generally, I'm not going to do anything very severe, very drastic without having some time to think about it. Customer information, customer feedback, and kind of what the market is demanding or is looking for, combined with where I actually want to go and where I want to be. That's my formula for handling that.
What about you, Howard?
First of all, on feedback, the fact that someone is reaching out back to me and they're asking questions and saying, what do you think? Can you do this? Can you do that? It means I'm doing something right. I think that comes to being wanted to some degree. I think people give me business for two reasons. I think people give me business because they want to. I think they're people certainly as capable, if not more capable, but I'm reliably reliable. And, you come across as that too. And as far as paralysis, I remember people saying there's never a good time to have a child. Either you have the child or you don't. You can always think it could be a good time or a bad time. Either you're in it or you're not. That's the advantage of doing that. You're doing something successfully, the fact that you've been doing this for 20 years.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. And they like you. I'm sure they like you too. I firmly believe there's always going to be somebody bigger and better than me. But I think that reliability and being able to take that risk, I know I doubt myself, and I know there is some paralysis, but you know what? I'm at the point in my life, I don't care. I'm just going to do it and see whether I fail or I succeed.
I mean, you guys are here today to talk to me about maximizing scarce resources, and we have covered a lot, and we've gone as deep as we can in our time together. Leave us with why. Why is it bold for us to really be aware and maximize our scarce resources?
I learned from failure and setback when my back's against the wall, and I'm going to say at the same time, as the Kenny Rogers song goes, got to know when to fold them too. As I've been doing this longer and longer, as you've been doing it, as you're a lifer too, I don't look at the risk of the paralysis. I look at it as if I don't take the risk, there's going to be something wrong with me. And I'm emotionally dying almost. It's not the fact I'm going to fail. It's the fact I'm not even willing to take that risk. That to me would be a defect of character almost. What my definition of boldness, or what Jessica's definition of boldness is, or yours, of course, it depends where you are in life as well, too. I have a 21-year-old son. I remember when he was first born, just holding him, I would tell my ex-wife, you do it, because I was scared. I certainly wasn't bold. But 6 months of holding him and being forced to and getting used to what I had to, it was a lot easier. So what my definition of bold might be today could be a lot different what it could be tomorrow, based on experience, based on setbacks, based on life, on life's terms.
One way to answer that question is if you're bootstrapping, whether it's leaving a job to do something that you believe in, building a product or building a service, or if you're doing it on nights and weekends, either way, your runway is limited, particularly if you are leaving steady, guaranteed income at a job, perhaps, to bootstrap. And I know a lot of people that have done this. I've done it this way myself. Your runway is very limited. There's a very different world when there's no guaranteed paycheck. Psychological look at everything changes when that guarantee isn't there. And it's really not a guarantee. That's a whole nother conversation. But your mind feels as if it's more permanent than you going out bootstrapping. One of the reasons you want to be bold about it and use those resources effectively and be as scrappy as you can is because your runway is going to be limited. What I mean by runway is the amount of time that you have before you have to go back to a job or just completely give up on which you should never do, by the way. Never give up on anything that you're trying to do. The amount of runway that you have to make that happen or to learn as much as you can may be limited. So you want to be as resourceful as possible.
Maximizing our scarce resources really means one thing: clarity, single focused clarity. So we know what we're doing. We know the reason we're doing it. We know how it's being done, both from the customer perspective and from our perspective internally, because that's where our revenue comes from. The product, the service that we sell, and how we package it so other people can understand it. And then what next? I mean, we got this thing. What do we do with it? What are our priorities? How are we serving more? How are we getting the word out more? How are we, whatever we've got to do in our own initiatives, in our own business, more? That's up to you. It's hard to go back when we're facing market changes, and we can't do what we've always been doing, maybe not even 6 months from now. So we must be thinking on our business. I mean, holy cow, 80% of businesses fail in the first 2 years, all right? And then anybody who can last 10 years is only 4. in 100 businesses, 4% of companies that are in business today will be in business 10 years from today. And we talk about doing more with less. It's a necessity. We must think on our business. We must understand our resources. And more importantly, we must invest in ourselves to be the leaders that we need to be to make our part of the business or the business that we own and lead successful in our definition of success. So how can you be objective? How can you provide guidance? And how can you complement your skill set with the resources you have? That's your question for today. Hold steady. We're all bootstrapping in some way. So find somebody else and ask a question. See what you can do to learn from them and recognize maybe there's another way you can do more with less. You will find all of today's program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P79. Maximize scarce resources. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 79. You can also search the site, Maximize Scarce Resources. You've listened, you've watched. Now, subscribe and rate our program on your preferred listening platform. We're on iTunes, we're on Google Play, we are on Stitcher. Just to name a few, visit the website, find one, and make sure you have our programs that air every Tuesday and Friday delivered directly to your listening queue. Your experiences and your beliefs define what it means to be a leader today. Your clarity and your feedback loops are a big part of understanding the resources we have. So remember, maximize those scarce resources.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.